Hey everyone, today I bring you the roadmap for my game Viático, the visual novel with a different kind of touch. So, just to clarify, Viático means travel expenses in Spanish. So, what are those colors that are on the name here? That's the Argentinian flag, which is a key location in the story and has relevance to every single character. So we'll be diving more into that as content for the game is added and as I keep making content in general for the game or about the game. So I broke this roadmap down into two core pillars, if you will, which are coding and general art that I consider that are parallel in importance because they are key to making any good game. So does each sort of category that I made here. All right. So 30% just means, in my consideration, to my own opinion, the amount of progress that we've made overall in each area. You'll start to see why when I break it down. And in 70% of coding, you'll see that there's some advancement, but there's still room to improve or add functions to the game that I'd like to, expand upon further down the line as I continue development on the game. So, explaining in a very simple way, UI functionality is at 95% because the game menu, basically, when you first start the game, is essentially done. Every single function, every single button, every single interface works, right? So I'm leaving a modest 5% here because I consider that you may need to do some bug fixes or minor repairs down the line. So you can't really confidently say that you are indeed at 100%. As you'll see down below that I did have 100% because main menus are actually done. I'll dive more into that later, but this does tie in its value to UI design, which is basically the same core design that I think that has to be iconic for the game, which is all of these, little sort of circuits and robotic kind of, aesthetic that you see here, and the glowing little, floating categories and such. That's a key aspect of the game, I believe, that has to be equally, if not more so, iconic than the main characters and the story and all the occurrences. Has to stick with you, and I think it's a pretty good starting point for me. I'm not a professional graphic designer or anything, but I like how it looks, and I think it's pretty memorable, and I think that's an important part in creating a good game. So this game is made in RimPy, which is a variant of Python programming language. So you basically have almost everything kind of set up for you, right? But like when it comes to like the artistic part, that's where it gets complicated because like in my case, I have 80% of the story script essentially finished. I'm leaving 20% because there's like nuances, branches that you may arise that you don't know about, or you can help tie in the story better between characters or a particular situation. You can explain it better. So that room for improvement and expansion, I leave that 20% because I consider that it still needs, some full refinement to get to the actual final product. But it's pretty advanced, as you can see by my own estimations. So scripting or implementation of the script, right, is not only the story per se and the narrative, but the actions and the, as we'll see down below, the branching, the routes, the different paths and decisions and opinions and different types of um, situations that you can choose to get yourself into, that in my case, in this case, it is 15% because I am restricted by the lack of essentially of art, as we can see. I'll keep explaining and it'll probably make sense later on. So, scripting is essentially just implementing the story script, but is also the narrative. In other games is basically any action that you do in the game, how what happens on the screen is basically coded in code, right? So that's it. And it's 15% because I lack the resources or the the art in general to implement it properly, right? At least to satisfy my own requirements. So as we'll keep on seeing, like you see that 42%, for example, that when you implement code, you're implementing, in the case of Ren'Py and any visual novel, you'll see that you're implementing basically backgrounds, right? You're implementing backgrounds, which are the kind of picture, anime kind of pictures that you see in the background here of the roadmap. I made it, sort of glossy and blurry, just for the purposes of not distracting you. But essentially, you're gonna need some form of art and background to illustrate where your character is at, what's he doing, and everything like that, right? So that ties in into character design, right? Um, but that is that number right there is a bit deceitful or a bit tricky because it says 64%, and I know I did the 64%. I said it was 64%. Why is that? Because I consider the 64% to represent the fact that I have the aesthetic, the clear vision or aspect of how I want my characters to look. So I designed them so like how they're gonna dress, the kind of skin tone, the height, the personality, everything like that. So I think that in that aspect of character design, we're pretty advanced, but we have no actual characters finished, from start to finish. Like we don't have like all the poses, all the expressions, every movement that you'll see on the screen that I want the characters to be expressive. They're not all done. So I'm leaving room for that remaining 46%, right? 36%, my bad. Um, so in the case of the 42% in backgrounds, that is also a key point because I've relied heavily on AI to create the backgrounds, right? But at the same time, I do kind of refine them or process them in a way to better adapt them to my game. Some of them more than others, but I don't want to overly rely on that because I want to make integrated scenes, which are essentially scenes where my characters, right, CGs, with where my characters are integrated as part of the background. So basically, they are in the scene, so to speak, because usually characters are like overlaid on top of the background. But then when you have like a particular scene that you want to draw attention to, you want to have an integrated scene, right? So that is an abysmal 2% because I have no art basically. Um, but I have the sort of the starting materials to make it with. So we'll start. We'll hopefully develop that further in the future, right? So then we go back to programming. In the case of main menus, you have main menus essentially done, as I said before. Every game menu works. It has no quirks or bugs or anything, as far as I know. But then you have like the composing parts that are in game beyond the main menu after you start the game. This doesn't represent that. This represents where you land when you start the game. But then you have the choice menus or the route menus, like the branching routes, right? And the secondary menus and so forth. This is essentially everything that leads from the main menus into the secondary menus. Which are they? The choice menus is essentially when something appears like when you're playing the story, reading through the story, and two or three or four or any kind of any amount of options appears in front of you and says, go for a coffee, go for a walk, I'll go in early, I'll hang back, you know. So essentially, all of those branching options, in my case, I want to have lay on them some extra weight, like some substance into them. What does that what does that mean? Um, Essentially, it means that every choice you make is consequent or relevant to the choice that you've made, and it sort of creates this chain effect, you know, sort of this chain reaction, right? Of different types of events unfolding from that one choice, sort of like a butterfly effect, right? And the same in the sense that you can do the same action or a small action that just ends up in a very random and potentially bizarre place, right? So you can say like, "Oh, I'll go in early," and by chances you get to see a hidden scene, for example, if you go in earlier into the office, for just as an example. So that is essentially what choice menus are, which tie in nicely into branching routes, which is the randomness and bizarre and or unpredictable or yeah, slightly predictable, because there are some cliches, I'm not gonna lie, but most of them are gonna have like a little tie-in, a little something that you won't necessarily see coming that may spice up things right along the way. So I want to make every single choice relevant or unique in a way that even within that choice, when you choose any other branching choice within that one, that it takes you to a different kind of reaction or narrative or something like that, obviously tied into Lautaro's story, right? Because that's a main character. So, and so this is kind of tied in, but not entirely, to the 15% of the, for example, the implementation of the script and scripting, and the amount of choice menus that I've included so far inside of the game. So it is a bit limited, but I consider that it can showcase right now how much of a choice and how much of an impact each individual choice has. I think that it can clearly give you that as far as it has. So it's like a proof of concept that this works, right? So that's what you'll see in game. At least I hope so. So secondary menus are very easy, right? Because that's basically config, the configuration screen, option screen, whatever you want to call it, the save screen, the any kind of screen that isn't the main menu, essentially. Um, but it is also menus like, for example, in my case, I'm implementing a flowchart of sorts in order to help you navigate the branching routes, because at first they may seem like just a couple, but then they're going to become a lot, and maybe you want to replay from a certain point in the story. So I'm going to add a flowchart to make you something of, make your life a little bit easier. That ties in nicely into quality of life functionalities, but I'll dive into that later. um, the point is, right now I have that flowchart uh, condensed into the current amount of choices. Also, I have implemented the galleries, right? Not with art, because obviously I don't have any integrated scenes or have finished fully any of the characters, but I do have like the baseline of where they're gonna go when you unlock different scenes, different sort of situations that I think are memorable. I'll obviously let you access that and replay them or whatever, be able to just see them and explore them. And also, I thought of implementing achievements, and that's also the reason why I think it's 75%, because I think it's a good idea to implement it from the get-go, like from the beginning, because I consider that to be a core part of of a good story. Like saying, "Oh, you did this, so I'll, basically." acknowledge that the game acknowledges that, sort of, that choice you made, or that series of choices that you made, and gives you sort of like a little medal, so to speak. In the original, I said it was going to be a medalla, a medal, but I know that it's more universal to just call it achievements, right? So it's probably going to stay medal, but who knows. Um, so going back to the part of quality of life functionality, right? That is essentially as it reads, right? Like it's everything that helps you make your life easier as a gamer, as a player, right? So it's quick menu access. So basically, any button that you see on screen that helps you like quickly do something, like a quick save, quick load, uh, quit without going into any other screen, or go back to the main menu without going into any other screen. Um, Going back on dialogue, like backtracking, backlogging, uh, dialogue, you can do that. Essentially, oh well, you have the functionality that I said, that you have the flow chart, access to the flow chart from the quick menu, and you can basically like streamline your experience within the game. So I don't want to, complicate things for you, or make, this a hard locked choice, so to speak. There are gonna be some soft locking in some aspects, but it's nothing as severe as saying, "Oh yeah, you screwed it up." Basically, no, that's not gonna come from me in this case, because I want you to basically tell Lautaro's story, the story of Lautaro, as best as you can, as yeah, basically just adapt it to you, to what you would do in that situation. I want you to fill in his shoes and live his life, essentially. So that also ties in, and because of secondary menus and everything, ties in into translations, right? Which is basically at 29%, because there are seven total languages, which include um, obviously English, you have Spanish, Latin American Spanish, you have Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, Russian, and Japanese. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this first of all because I want to make a statement to the world that I can, basically do a good story when I have been frustrated, or I haven't really felt identified with some of the choices some stories give you. Like some stories don't give you enough choice, or they give you cliched choices. And that frustrated me for as many years as I can remember, since I started playing visual novels, since like I was like 8 or 10, you know? So this is my statement on that, right? So going back to the art part of the art aspect of our explanations. So why is this like another main story or whatever here, right? As an equivalent of 15%? Because this is the part that everything has integrated into, that reflects the actual scripting, right? The actual implementation of the script at 15%. This is almost always going to be, parallel in its value, because I obviously update this as we go along, as I continue development. So the main story essentially is how well you integrated everything in here, and have it into a comprehensive and understandable, digestible story, right? So that is how you represent the routes. That ties in nicely into routes. So you have, that's not a five, that's not a one next to it. It's just a web of nonsense that you can see there that I'll explain. But it's 5% what you can see there. 5%. And in that 5%, you have each 1% and a bit of another percentage of each of the main girls' routes, right? But this is not limited to just like the romantic aspect of each route. You'll have the chance or the opportunity to basically screw up, or even friend zone the girl. Like if you don't like her after a certain point, after a certain event, I'm gonna try and let you live your life as best as you can. You can mix and match girls. You can forego all the girls and live your own life, or you can just try and get them all, but try and catch them all, basically like a Pokemon. So each of them are tied in into each their own route, but then they have mutually exclusive routes, and then mixed routes. Like you can have this girl and this girl with this girl, but not of none of them. You can have this girl and this girl, and this girl, but then at some point in the story you can take her away. You can say, okay, I don't want you anymore. Obviously, like I said, there are gonna be certain points that are soft locked. So basically, if you're nearing the end, it's not like at any point you can just tell her no. No, there's gonna be specific choices that let you opt in or opt out of certain relationships, obviously, because this is at the end of the day a linear story, right? So, um, you're going to have miscellaneous routes and you're going to have alternative routes, which are the aforementioned, right? Like I said, you're going to have the alternative of, basically keeping to yourself, or just encountering a totally different way, unexpected, almost hidden or secret way. I didn't want to phrase it that way. I didn't want to say it was a secret or a surprise, because I thought basically you can't really expect. Well, you can't really know what to expect. So I think that basically sums it up as best as I can. And I think I consider everything that I've showcased today to be a core aspect in developing any good game, but in this case, more specifically, a good visual novel, right? So I'm taking the time to do this. I hope I can, share more with you as we go along. I'm open to talking about anything about the development or about where I come from with all these ideas. I'm happy to share that. So please let me know if you have any questions. And I hope you enjoyed this, because I am enjoying the process, but I also need some support to better, execute everything and make as best of a story as I can, right? So I appreciate you all for listening and sticking through with the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.